Revenge Diaries with I Am.
He wasn't just cheating. He was doing it with my best friend. That sentence alone could burn a hole in anyone's chest. And when I discovered it, it felt like someone had shoved a knife between my ribs and twisted it. My name is Claire, and I thought I had built the perfect life. A loyal boyfriend, Ethan, who had been with me for 3 years. A best friend since childhood, Jenna, who knew me better than anyone. The two of them were the pillars of my world, the people I trusted most. Together, we were inseparable. Jenna came over for movie nights, Ethan cooked us dinner, and I always felt like the luckiest person alive. People envied our little trio, calling us the Unbreakables. Looking back now, I can't decide if that nickname was cruel foreshadowing, or just the universe laughing at me. Ethan was charming in a quiet, dangerous way. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he had that magnetic pull that made everyone lean in when he spoke. Jenna was the opposite, vibrant, bold. Always the one pushing me to take risks I wouldn't dare on my own. Together they balanced me out, or at least I thought they did. But perfect pictures have cracks, and sometimes those cracks start as shadows you don't want to see. It began small little things I brushed off. Ethan started canceling our dates with flimsy excuses, saying he had late work meetings. Jenna became oddly distant at times, rushing off phone calls with me like someone was listening in. Once, when I stopped by her apartment unannounced, she practically shoved me out the door, muttering about a mess inside she didn't want me to see. Still, I convinced myself it was nothing. That's what you do when you love people, right? You give them the benefit of the doubt. But the human heart is rarely wrong. Deep down, I felt the tremor long before the earthquake hit. I noticed Ethan's cologne lingering faintly on Jenna's sweater one night. I laughed it off, saying maybe she had hugged him when she came over. I noticed Jenna's text lighting up at 2 a.m., her face glowing in the dark as she quickly turned her phone over. Again I dismissed it. Yet, the more I tried to silence the unease, the louder it grew. And then came the moment, the one that confirmed the nightmare I was already half-living. It was a single slip of the tongue, a phrase Ethan used in bed one night that I had never told anyone else. But Jenna knew it. Only Jenna. That was the first time I realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. When people talk about betrayal, they usually describe it as a sharp, clean-cut, sudden and devastating. But in reality, betrayal seeps in slowly, like water dripping into a foundation. First, it's barely noticeable. By the time you realize what's happening, the walls are already rotting. After that night, the slip of Ethan's tongue, I couldn't stop thinking about it. He had used a phrase so specific, so private, that the only other person who knew it was Jenna. First, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe I'd mentioned it in passing and forgotten. But the thought kept nagging like an itch under my skin. And then the red flags started stacking up. The first one came during Jenna's birthday dinner. I had been planning it for weeks. A small surprise at her favorite rooftop restaurant. Ethan offered to help, but instead of asking what I needed, he took over completely. He picked the cake, the wine, even the gift. When Jenna unwrapped the silver bracelet he'd chosen, she gasped. Not just with surprise, but with familiarity. "Oh my God," she said, eyes wide. "This is exactly what I wanted." I sat there, forcing a smile, my stomach twisting. How did Ethan know what she wanted when even I didn't? I had asked Jenna multiple times and she had brushed me off, saying, "Surprise me." That night, I barely tasted my food. Ethan and Jenna laughed across the table like co-conspirators, sharing inside jokes I wasn't part of. Every time I tried to join in, their laughter quieted, like I'd walked in on a secret. The second red flag came a week later. Ethan had been working late, or so he said. I called him around 9 p.m., but his phone went straight to voicemail. Annoyed, I dialed again, and this time it rang once before cutting off. Minutes later, Jenna called me out of the blue. "Hey Claire," she said, her voice oddly breathless. "Just checking in. How are you?" It struck me as strange. Jenna never called late at night, and she sounded nervous. I asked where she was, and she gave me some vague answer about being out with friends. The background noise was muffled, like she'd stepped away to take the call. I wanted to press her to ask who she was with, but instead I swallowed my questions. It felt paranoid, unfair. After all, these were the two people I trusted most. Still, the doubt grew. The third red flag came in the form of money. Ethan and I had been saving for a vacation to Italy, something we talked about for years. But suddenly the savings account was lighter. Not empty, but enough was missing to make me worry. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. Car repairs, he said. You know how expensive mechanics are. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. I checked his car the next morning. There was nothing new, no receipts, no fresh parts, no signs of work done. My chest tightened with unease, but again I told myself not to spiral. Doubt can ruin relationships just as quickly as betrayal. I didn't want to be the jealous, suspicious girlfriend. But the final red flag that month nearly broke me. Jenna and I had always had this tradition. Saturday morning coffee at a little cafe near her apartment. It was our safe space, our ritual since college. But lately, she'd been canceling last minute. Too tired, she'd say. Work's insane. One morning, after yet another cancellation, I decided to surprise her instead. I grabbed 2 lattes and walked to her apartment. But when I rang the bell, no one answered. Her car was parked out front, so I knew she was home. After a few minutes, I texted her. Hey, outside your door with coffee. The reply came instantly. Oh no, I just stepped out. Rain check. I stared at her car still sitting there and my chest hollowed. Why lie about something so small? I left the coffee at her doorstep anyway, my hands shaking. That evening when she finally called, her voice was bright and bubbly, like nothing had happened. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Because if I opened that door, I was terrified of what I might find on the other side. Everywhere I looked, the pieces didn't add up. Ethan pulling away, Jenna dodging me, their excuses overlapping like 2 halves of the same lie. And yet, I kept convincing myself I was imagining it. But at night, lying awake in the dark, I couldn't silence the questions. Why was Ethan always so quick to defend Jenna? Why did Jenna seem to know his schedule better than I did? And why, when the 3 of us were together, did I feel like the outsider? The more I tried to bury the unease, the more it clawed its way to the surface. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong yet. There's a saying. When you look for the truth, be ready to find it. I wasn't ready. Not for this. It happened on a Friday night. Ethan had told me he was working late again. And Jenna had texted me earlier that she was too tired to hang out. My plan was simple. Curl up on the couch, pour some wine, and try not to drown in the creeping unease that had become my new normal. But unease has a way of pushing you to act. Halfway through my glass of wine, I grabbed my coat and keys. Something in me snapped. I needed answers. I drove to Ethan's office first, hoping to surprise him, maybe even catch him in an innocent lie I could laugh about later. But the office building was dark, empty. His car wasn't in the lot. My chest tightened. Next stop, Jenna's apartment. Her place was just a few blocks away, and my hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire drive. I told myself I was crazy, paranoid. But when I pulled up and saw Ethan's car parked out front, my world tilted. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. My stomach churned, my fingers numb against the steering wheel. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. There had to be. But then the lights flickered on in her living room, and I saw them. Through the sheer curtains their silhouettes moved. His hand on her waist, her head tilting back in laughter, his lips pressing against hers. It felt like watching a horror movie, except I was trapped inside it, unable to look away. Every second burned into me like acid. 3 years with him. A lifetime with her. And they were both betraying me in the cruelest way possible. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved as if the air had been sucked out of the world. My vision blurred with tears, and for a moment I thought I might pass out. I stumbled out of the car, legs shaking beneath me. I didn't care if they saw me. I didn't care about anything anymore. I marched to her door and pounded on it with every ounce of fury boiling inside me. The laughter stopped. I heard scrambling whispers, the hurried shuffle of feet. Then the door cracked open and there they were. Ethan, shirt half-buttoned, hair disheveled. Jenna wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide with guilt. The silence between us was louder than any scream. Claire, Ethan started, his voice low, pleading. I raised my hand, cutting him off. Don't. Just don't. My voice shook, but my eyes locked on his, unblinking. How long? Neither answered. Their silence was the only confession I needed. Jenna finally spoke, her voice trembling. Claire, I didn't mean for this to happen. Didn't mean for this? I laughed bitterly, though the sound cracked halfway through. You didn't mean to betray me? To crawl into bed with the one person I trusted most? She flinched. Ethan reached out like he wanted to touch me to calm me, but I stepped back so fast he froze. Don't you dare, I hissed. You both disgust me. The rage inside me was blinding, but underneath it all was something worse. Shattered disbelief. My mind raced back through every red flag, every late night, every excuse. The pieces fit together now, forming a cruel puzzle I never wanted to solve. I wanted to scream, to break something, to claw the betrayal out of my chest. But instead I stood there, my hands trembling, my heart bleeding silently inside me. Finally I spoke, my voice low and cold. You think you've won? You think you've taken everything from me? I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. You have no idea what you've started. Their eyes widened, maybe at the venom in my tone, maybe because they'd never seen me like this before. I turned on my heel and walked away, each step heavier than the last. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I'd break. But as I slid into my car, one thought burned hotter than the rest. They wanted everything I had. Him, her, both of them. But if they thought I'd let them get away with it, they didn't know me at all. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Heartbreak has stages. First comes the shock, numb and suffocating. Then comes the ache, the endless loop of why. And then comes something darker. The night I caught Ethan and Jenna together, I barely remember driving home. My hands shook on the wheel, my eyes blurred with tears until the headlights smeared into ghostly streaks across the highway. By the time I stumbled through my apartment door, I collapsed on the floor, sobbing until my chest hurt. For 2 days I barely moved. My phone buzzed with missed calls from Ethan, even a few half-hearted texts from Jenna, but I ignored them. Food sat untouched on the counter, and my reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, broken. Everywhere I turned there were memories. The couch where Ethan and I binge-watched shows, the framed photo of me and Jenna at the beach, grinning like sisters. Every reminder was a knife. I thought that pain would destroy me. I thought I'd drown in it. But grief is strange. It changes shape when you least expect it. On the third day, I opened my laptop, desperate for distraction. My cursor hovered over a folder labeled Italy trip plans. I clicked it and dozens of files popped up, budgets, itineraries, flight ideas. Our dream vacation, the one Ethan and I had been saving for. Except when I checked the shared account linked in one of the files, my stomach dropped. The money was gone. Completely drained. My breath caught. Car repairs, he had said. But here it was in black and white. Ethan had siphoned away everything we'd saved. Not just mine. Ours. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not with weakness but with fire. He hadn't just cheated with my best friend. He'd stolen my dreams, my trust, and laughed behind my back while doing it. And Jenna? She'd smiled in my face, called me sister, while sharing my boyfriend's bed and covering his lies. I pressed my palms against the desk, trembling, but this time not from grief. Rage pulsed through me, sharp and alive. For the first time since it happened, I wasn't crying. I was thinking. They wanted everything I had. They wanted me gone so they could build their little fairy tale on my ashes. But what if I refused to burn? That thought lit a fuse in me. I stood, pacing the apartment, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. My mind replayed every moment. Ethan's dismissive shrugs, Jenna's sudden cancellations, the way they laughed across the table like I was invisible. Every red flag I'd ignored now glowed neon in my memory. They had underestimated me. And then came the trigger, the final push. I got a message notification. It was a photo sent from an unknown number. My heart stopped when I opened it. It was Ethan and Jenna together, smiling in front of the very restaurant where we'd celebrated Jenna's last birthday. His arm wrapped around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking smug and blissful. The caption burned itself into my mind. We deserve to be happy too. That single word was gasoline on the fire raging inside me. Happy too? After everything they'd taken? After they'd stolen not just my partner but my best friend, my money, my peace of mind? And now they wanted to parade their betrayal in my face like I was some fool who'd simply step aside? No, absolutely not. I stared at the photo until my tears dried, until my breathing slowed. The grief had melted into something sharper, steadier. Determination. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure they regretted every lie, every stolen kiss, every dollar taken from me. I walked to the bathroom mirror and studied myself. My eyes were red, my cheeks hollow, but beneath the exhaustion was something new. Strength. This isn't the end, I whispered to my reflection. It's the beginning. That night I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 2 names at the top, Ethan and Jenna. Underneath, I listed everything they'd stolen. My trust, my savings, my dignity, my time. And then in bold letters I wrote the words that would guide me from that moment forward. Take back everything. For the first time in days I felt alive. They thought I'd crumble. They thought they'd won. But they had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. The first rule I gave myself was simple. No scenes. No dramatic confrontations until I had everything lined up like dominoes. I'd learned the hard way that fury without proof is just noise. And noise gets ignored, laughed off, or worse, used against you. If I was going to take back everything he wanted, I needed a plan that was cold, precise, and impossible to deny. Step 1. Document the theft. I dug through bank app records, screenshots, and old emails I thought I'd deleted. I didn't hack anything. I used what was already mine, our joint account history, the copies of receipts Ethan had asked me to save just in case, and the travel fund spreadsheet he'd once bragged about updating. There it was. Transfers marked car repairs and utilities that lined up too neatly with nights when he was supposed to be at work. One transfer to an anonymous little LLC in the next town sent a chill down my spine. I printed everything. Paper is heavy. Paper feels real. Step 2. Preserve the conversations. Texts were slippery, easy to delete, easy to deny. So I went old school. I screenshot entire threads with timestamps. I cross-referenced metadata. The little things Ethan and Jenna had slipped up on. A phrase he used in private, the nickname she'd once called him when she thought I wasn't listening. I saved voicemails, recorded calls I had a legal right to record, and backed it all up to a drive that wasn't connected to my apartment. If they tried to gaslight me, these files would be my witness. Step 3. Get a neutral witness. I hired a private investigator. It felt like admitting defeat to pay someone, but this wasn't about pride. The PI's job was simple. Obtain independent confirmation, parking timestamps, photos of them together at odd times, and a record of whose car was where and when. Within a week he delivered images. Ethan's car outside Jenna's place at 2 a.m., receipts from a boutique where neither of them worked, a photo of Jenna slipping into a hotel lobby with Ethan's jacket slung over her arm. The files were clinical, devoid of melodrama, and that made them deadly. Step 4. Set the bait. If evidence exposed the theft and cheating, it still wouldn't shake the arrogance they wore like armor. People like Ethan and Jenna thrive on the illusion of control. So I built a trap that felt natural, something they'd walk into because they simply couldn't resist showing off. I spread a rumor carefully and through channels they trusted about a lucrative freelance contract for Ethan. The word made its way to him through a mutual friend. The gig would require him to meet an industry contact at a swanky launch party downtown. Of course, the contact didn't exist. The party did. Cameras would. Step 5. Layer the emotional sting. Money and infidelity were proof, but humiliation would be the wedge that split them apart publicly and privately. I reached out to people Jenna had confided in, the coworkers and 1 or 2 old friends who'd been hurt by her half-truths. I didn't blackmail. I offered them a chance to speak honestly, privately, and only if they felt comfortable. A few agreed. I wasn't trying to ruin lives out of spite. I wanted the truth to be unavoidable, and for me to be the one holding the microphone. Step 6. Protect myself. I tied up loose ends. Closed accounts she could access. Changed passwords. I made sure there was no shadow in my life she could use to paint me as unstable. If it came to lawyers, police statements, or public drama, I would be the composed one with receipts, witnesses, and a clear timeline. Through it all, they still strutted as if nothing had happened. Ethan posted staged photos, sunset smiles, new beginnings, captions about growth. Jenna shared snapshots of brunch and flowers. Their arrogance made my stomach twist, but it also fueled me. Every smug selfie was a target. Night after night, I assembled the pieces on my dining table. Bank printouts, screenshots, printouts from the PI, a list of people who had agreed to speak. Started to look like a dossier. When I couldn't sleep, I read it like a ritual, letting the cold facts harden my resolve. The plan had one final delicate element: timing. Expose too early and they'd smear me. Wait too long and they'd have time to hide drains, rewrite histories, or transfer money again. I needed the moment when they felt most invulnerable. The night Ethan would accept the freelance gig. The night they believed themselves untouchable. On the eve of the launch party, I set the trap in motion. I slid a sealed envelope containing a copy of the transfer receipts and a short, civil note into the mailbox of a mutual friend of theirs. A person who loved gossip and had the kind of social reach that made rumors virulent. I contacted the PI to be at the party entrance with a camera. I messaged the friend who'd been burned by Jenna and told her simply, "Tonight's the night. If you want to tell the truth, I'll be there." As I locked my front door, the dossier tucked under my arm, my hands didn't tremble. I felt a terrible calm, like a storm finally forming on the horizon. They still thought they were in control. That arrogance would be their downfall. One more sleep. One more move. Then everything would change. The launch party glittered like a stage set. The kind of place where reputations are polished until they shine. Glass chandeliers, a violinist in the corner. People in suits who smiled like they owned the world. Ethan moved through the crowd the way predators move through prey. Confident, practiced, convinced of his invisibility. I stood by the entrance with the PI's camera tucked under my coat, and the dossier in my bag, feeling calm in a way that surprised me. All the work, the bank prints, the voicemails, the PI photos, felt weighty and real in my hands. Tonight they would stop being proof in a drawer and become truth in the open. The mutual friend, the one who loved gossip and had the social reach I'd primed, was waiting near the bar. She didn't need convincing. She'd read the receipts and the screenshots, and her eyes were cold with righteous delight. We had rehearsed nothing. We needed only the rawness of the moment. Ethan arrived, haloed in small talk and people who wanted a piece of his charm. He went through the motions of mingling, and Jenna glided beside him, laughing on cue. They were intoxicated with their own audacity. My friend tapped her glass and climbed onto a small raised platform used for toasts. Conversations dimmed into a hum. All ears turned. "Can I say something?" she asked, and the room obliged. She didn't hesitate. She held up a printed page, one of the bank transfers I'd highlighted in red. "Some of you know Ethan as the guy who's always there for clients, who's honest and reliable," she said, voice steady. "I knew him as someone who stole from people who trusted him, me included." She let that hang, then flicked the page so it caught the light. A murmur. Ethan's smile flickered. Then, as if on cue, the PI signaled from the doorway. The screens used for the event, sponsors' logos and promotional reels, cut to black and then to a slide. Time-stamped photos of Ethan's car outside Jenna's apartment at 2 a.m., screenshots of their texts, voicemails I'd preserved, and the hotel photo that had first burned in my head. One by one, the images filled the screen. The room felt narrower with each frame. "You have to be kidding me," someone whispered. The violinist stopped mid-note. Ethan's face went pale, but he tried the practiced laugh, the shrug. "This is private," he started, but his voice dissolved under the shifting sound of the crowd. My friend raised the volume of her phone. A recording played, Ethan's voice using that private phrase, Jenna's laugh right after it. It was clinical, undeniable. Heads turned toward them, not with curiosity now but with the sharpness of judgment. "You think this is cruel," she said. "But the truth is kind. We deserve to know who we're celebrating." She slid a copy of the transfer receipts into the hands of a man standing nearby, one of Ethan's supposed industry contacts. He read, eyes widening. Someone else, an HR rep from Ethan's firm who'd been at the party, gave an intake nod and pulled out her phone. I watched everything with a detached clarity. Friends whispering into phones, messages flying, the industry contact stepping away and dialing. A woman in the crowd recognized Jenna, her coworker from a magazine, and her face hardened. People I'd reached out to earlier started approaching one by one, offering corroboration. Their voices wove together into a net none of them could slip from. Ethan lunged for damage control. A smooth apology, a claim of misunderstanding, a plea for privacy. But the photos had been shared. The recording had been played. The receipts were now in the hands of people who could make decisions. Employers, mutual friends, the firm's HR director. The final act of the trap unfolded quicker than I expected. The industry contact, real and now very much skeptical, went straight to the event organizer. Within minutes, the organizer's expression shifted from awkward to urgent. The HR director called Ethan into a private room under the pretense of a personnel matter. He emerged an hour later flanked not by colleagues but by 2 police officers. One of them approached the small cluster where I stood, the dossier on my arm, the PI's camera still ticking. "We received a report of potential financial fraud and identity theft connected to transactions through an LLC," he said, eyes on Ethan. "We'd like to speak with him." Ethan's world collapsed in the slow, horrible way I'd imagined. Confusion, then bargaining, then a raw, desperate panic. Jenna reached for him and found hands that wouldn't hold her. Friends who had once toasted with them now averted their eyes. Someone had already posted video clips from the party. The hashtags began to bloom like wildfire. That same night, thanks to the evidence I'd handed the officer, the bank placed a temporary freeze on the suspicious transfers and initiated an investigation. The PI's photos, time-stamped and third-party verified, were entered into the report along with the voicemails and screenshots. The law, which had felt like an abstract threat months ago, was now a tangible force moving toward them. They had wanted everything. My love, my future plans, my savings, my complacency. I watched as those things unraveled around them. Ethan's promising gig evaporated. The industry contact withdrew any offers. Jenna's manager contacted HR at her workplace after seeing the footage. Whispers became formal inquiries. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I had built the machine and watched it run. The satisfaction was not in shouting but in the precise, irreversible click of dominoes falling. As I left the party, the cold night air felt like a benediction. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance on their ruin. I simply slid into my car, fingers still warm from the dossier, and exhaled. In the rearview, Ethan stood under the party lights, surrounded by officers, his face the shade of a man who'd lost more than he ever intended to gamble. I had taken back what he'd wanted. My life, my savings, my dignity, and the future he tried to buy with lies. The storm had broken, and I was the calm I moving away from the wreckage. But as the city lights blurred past, I felt something else stir. A quiet, unshakable hunger for what came next. Justice had been served tonight, but the story wasn't over. Not yet. The morning after the party, my phone lit up like fireworks. Messages, calls, notifications. Everyone wanted to talk about what had happened. Clips from the event were already viral. Ethan's pale, panicked face had been replayed thousands of times, and Jenna's stunned silence became a meme overnight. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done the heavy lifting for me. By Monday, Ethan's firm released a statement announcing his suspension, pending investigation into financial misconduct. I didn't have to read between the lines, they were cutting ties fast. The bank officially froze the stolen funds, and thanks to the paper trail, a portion of what he'd siphoned was transferred back into my account. The Italy fund wasn't whole again, but the symbolic victory was priceless. Jenna's downfall was quieter but no less brutal. Her workplace, the glossy magazine where she'd strutted as if she were untouchable, couldn't ignore the footage of her laughing while my savings and trust disappeared. Gossip spreads fast in media circles, and soon doors she thought were wide open slammed shut. The calls she'd once bragged about never came again. For weeks I watched them unravel. Friends distanced themselves, family members whispered behind closed doors, invitations dried up. They had each other, sure, but only in the way 2 drowning people cling together while the tide drags them under. And me? I started breathing again. I closed the joint accounts for good. I redecorated my apartment, stripping away every photo, every trace of them. I reached out to the friends I had neglected while stuck in their toxic orbit. Slowly, laughter crept back into my life. I even booked a trip to Italy solo. I would walk those cobblestone streets on my own terms, not as someone's shadow. The biggest shift, though, wasn't external. It was inside me. Betrayal had nearly broken me, but it also forged me. I realized my strength wasn't in how much I could endure, but in how fiercely I could rise. Ethan and Jenna thought they'd taken everything, but all they really did was hand me back the one thing I'd forgotten I had, myself. One evening, weeks later, I bumped into Jenna at a coffee shop. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, eyes darting, makeup smudged. For a second I almost felt pity. But then I remembered the night I saw her silhouette with Ethan. laughing while my world shattered. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. I didn't let her. I simply smiled, lifted my coffee, and walked out without a word. Because the truth was, she wasn't my problem anymore. Neither of them were. I had taken back everything they wanted, and more. My dignity, my peace, my future. And now, standing stronger than ever, I can tell you this. Poetic justice isn't about revenge being loud. It's about revenge being undeniable. They tried to bury me, but I became the ground they tripped on.